at 5:12 a.m. on Sunday, with rain tapping the high windows of the borrowed kitchen in Newark. Ivy Singh pressed her hands around a paper cup of coffee gone cold and tried to bring feeling back into her fingers before she touched butter again. The industrial mixer rattled against the tile floor, old enough to wobble when it ran at speed, and the fluorescent lights made everything look harsher than it was. Flour dust in the air, cracked enamel on the prep tables, the dark crescents under her eyes reflected in the stainless steel refrigerator door. She set the cup down, opened her coin purse, and counted what she had left for ingredients with the concentration of someone measuring oxygen. $10 in quarters, 4 in dimes and nickels, 2 folded ones damp from her coat pocket. She lined them by value, then counted a second time to make sure panic wasn't changing arithmetic. Butter had gone up again. Eggs had gone up. Cardboard boxes had gone up. Electricity had gone up so often she no longer reacted when bills arrived. On her apartment table, under a cracked ceramic sugar bowl she used as a paperweight, 3 overdue notices were curling at the corners from the humidity. Rent, electric. A final warning from the pharmacy account tied to her brother's insulin. She lifted the butter block from the walk-in and shaved off exactly what she needed. No extra for safety, no margin for error. Her wrists ached from yesterday's wedding order that had paid barely enough to cover flour and gas, and her lower back throbbed each time she leaned over the table. She worked anyway, because work was the only part of the week that still moved in a straight line. Preheat, whip, fold, bake, cool, frost, box, deliver. Collect payment in cash from a man who never appeared at the door, but whose name could silence an entire room. By 6:03, she had leveled the second sponge and checked the oven twice in 3 minutes, even though she knew the temperature held steady. Her phone, face down beside a sack of sugar, buzzed against steel and then buzzed again. She ignored it until the third vibration, then wiped her palms on her apron and looked. One reminder from the clinic portal for Arun's lab work. One text from their landlord asking when he should expect movement on the balance. One missed call from an unknown number with a Newark exchange. She locked the screen without opening anything and turned back to the cake because if she started reading messages in detail, she would lose the morning. Arun had fallen asleep at the table when she left the apartment, cheek on his chemistry workbook, pencil still in his hand. He was 19, but looked younger when he slept, thinner than he should have been, all elbows and shadows, his glucometer kit lined up beside him like a second set of school supplies. Ivy had kissed the top of his head, adjusted the blanket over his shoulders, and checked the refrigerator one more time before leaving. 2 insulin pens left in the box. She had done the subtraction twice in her head during the bus ride to the kitchen, and then once more while measuring sugar. At 7:18, she spread the crumb coat in smooth, efficient strokes and forced herself to breathe through the pinch in her chest. The order was always the same. 1 8-inch white cake, vanilla bean, minimalist finish, no inscription, no decorative flourishes unless requested in advance. It arrived at Luca Moretti's townhouse every Sunday before 9, and an envelope returned to her every Sunday with enough money to hold off collapse for another week. Not enough to exhale. Enough to keep doors from shutting all at once. The rain had thickened by the time she sealed the cake inside a white bakery box and slid it into a larger carrier lined with a non-slip mat. She changed from her flour-stained prep apron into her delivery coat, though flour still clung to the cuffs and the hem of her black pants still showed a frayed seam she kept promising herself she would fix. Outside, the city looked scrubbed and exhausted at the same time. Wet asphalt reflecting traffic lights, corner stores lifting shutters, delivery trucks idling at curbs with steam rising from exhaust pipes. She walked 3 blocks through spray kicked up by buses, then took a car service she could not afford to save 15 minutes she could not lose. Moretti Street always looked quieter than it should have. a narrow stretch of polished townhouses near the old waterfront, where money had moved in faster than memory. The first SUV sat curbside in matte black, engine running. A second was parked half a block down. Men in tailored dark coats stood in the rain without hunching. Earpieces tucked under close-cropped hair, their attention sweeping intersections and windows with practiced rhythm. Ivy lowered her gaze, lifted the cake carrier higher against her ribs, and gave her name before anyone asked. One of the security men nodded, opened the pedestrian gate, and gestured her inside with 2 fingers. The path to the main entrance was slate stone, slick with rain, bordered by trimmed hedges and low lights that made water gleam like glass. She climbed marble steps in shoes with worn soles and pressed the bell beside an iron door so heavy it looked like it belonged to a bank vault rather than a home. The door opened on warmth, polished wood, and the faint scent of citrus cleaner layered over expensive cologne. Crystal light spilled from a chandelier high enough that Ivy had never seen where it ended. She stood on the threshold until the house manager appeared from the corridor, tablet in hand, posture precise enough to make stillness look like a discipline. "Ms. Singh," the woman said, "you are 40 seconds outside the preferred window." Ivy tightened her grip on the box. Rain delayed traffic on Raymond Boulevard. A contingency should account for weather. The manager's eyes moved once over Ivy's coat and shoes, then returned to her face. "Carry level, please. Last week the right edge dipped." It didn't shift? It nearly did. The manager turned and led her through the foyer. Rugs thick enough to silence footsteps ran the length of the hall. Framed art lined the walls and measured spacing. Somewhere deeper in the house, a clock chimed the quarter hour. Ivy followed at an exact distance because she had learned that if she walked too close, the manager stepped aside without looking at her. If she lagged, someone from security appeared near her shoulder. Staff protocol, she had been told. Efficient flow. In the service pantry off the main dining room, the manager indicated a cleared section of marble counter. "Set it there." Ivy placed the carrier down, opened it, and transferred the white box carefully to the marked square of stone. The manager checked the label, confirmed the seal, and made a note on her tablet. Her voice remained neutral, but each sentence landed like a correction delivered in a classroom full of people. "Next week, knock once and then wait. You rang twice." "I thought the first one didn't sound." "It sounded." Ivy nodded. Because argument cost energy she needed elsewhere. Through the partially open doorway, she could see the dining room table, long enough for 14 place settings, and beyond it, floor-to-ceiling windows beaded with rain. In the reflection, she caught herself beside the crystal and dark wood. Damp coat, chapped knuckles, hair pinned up with 2 mismatched clips. She looked like a stain that had wandered into a museum. The manager closed the carrier, slid an envelope across the counter, and paused before releasing it. "You were informed this order remains private. No discussion with other vendors, no photographs, no social media mention. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good." The manager let go. "Have a dry drive back." Ivy tucked the envelope into the inside pocket of her coat, murmured thanks, and retraced her steps through the foyer. No one else appeared. She had delivered 22 cakes to this address over 5 months and had never spoken to Luca Moretti directly. Once, on her 4th visit, she had glimpsed him at the top of the main staircase, hand on the rail, dark suit, expression unreadable in the fractured light from the chandelier. The security guard near the door had looked up only after he turned away. Outside, the rain had eased to a fine mist. Ivy stepped through the gate and did not open the envelope until she was back in the car, parked 2 streets over beside a boarded deli. She counted once, then again. 1,200 in clean bills, folded by denomination. Enough to cover Aaron's insulin refill and half the rent arrears if the landlord accepted a split payment. Not enough to clear all 3 notices, but enough to prevent the week from breaking in half on Monday. At 9:11, she stood in line at a 24-hour pharmacy with damp cuffs and a white bakery box ribbon still stuck to her sleeve. The pharmacist recognized her, scanned the prescription, and named a number that made her pulse kick before she handed over cash from the envelope. He counted it, printed a receipt, and slid the insulated bag across the counter with a practiced gentleness that felt kinder than most words she heard in a day. By late morning, the rain stopped and thin sunlight pushed through the apartment window over the sink, revealing dust on the sill and tiny cracks in the paint she had stopped seeing. Aaron sat at the table in yesterday's t-shirt, hair sticking up at the back, calculator beside his workbook, trying to make a joke about how chemistry would fail him before debt collectors did. Ivy managed to smile, set the pharmacy bag in front of him, and watched his shoulders lower in relief he tried to hide. She warmed leftover dal on the stove, ignored 2 more messages from the landlord, and wrote numbers on the back of a flour invoice until they blurred together. What had been paid? What remained? What could wait 3 days? What could not wait at all? The white cake box from the morning sat flattened near the recycling bin, clean and empty. The kind of packaging meant to look effortless. Ivy stared at it longer than she meant to, then folded it once more along the scored lines and slid it underneath the sink, as if keeping it might make next Sunday arrive, with fewer edges. The cabinet door under the sink thudded shut, and the sound seemed louder than it should have in the narrow apartment kitchen. Ivy straightened too fast, felt her lower back pull, and braced a hand on the counter until the ache eased. Behind her, Aaron clicked his calculator twice, then set it down like he had reached a number he did not want to say out loud. A hard knock landed on the apartment door, not a neighbor's polite tap. 3 blunt hits, a pause, then 2 more. Aaron looked up first. I can get it. No. Ivy wiped her palms on her leggings and crossed the living room before the second round started. Through the peephole, she saw their landlord, Mr. D'Angelo, in a camel coat with rain beaded on the shoulders, holding a clipboard and a plastic folder tucked under one arm. She opened the door only halfway. He gave her the practiced smile he used when he wanted to sound reasonable while pressing harder. Mrs. Singh. Afternoon. Mr. D'Angelo. His eyes drifted past her toward the apartment interior, lingering on the peeling paint near the heater and the stack of bakery boxes by the wall. I sent messages. I saw them. And? She kept her voice level. I paid part this morning. I can transfer the rest of last month by Thursday. His smile thinned. You've said Thursday before. I'm not saying it casually. He slid one page from the folder, tapped the highlighted line with a capped pen. Procedure says I post this now and proceed if balance isn't cleared. You understand it's not personal. Nothing in his tone was personal, which somehow made it worse. Ivy accepted the notice with fingers that had gone cold again. I understand. Procedure? Good. Also, Apartment 3B complained about hallway smell from your food prep. I don't prep here. I reheat dinner. Then maybe keep windows open when you cook. He glanced down at her sleeve, still faintly dusted with flour despite the coat change. And no business deliveries in common areas. Insurance issue. Arun's chair scraped inside the apartment. Mr. D'Angelo lifted his chin, as if he had just remembered there was another person living there, and lowered his voice by half a shade. I know things are tight, but this building isn't a charity. If this unit doesn't work for your budget, there are options farther west. Farther west meant 2 buses to Arun's clinic and a neighborhood where she would not let him walk alone after dark. Ivy held the paper flat so he would not see it shake. Thursday. He paused long enough to make the silence a warning, then stepped back. Thursday, then. She shut the door, turned the lock, and stood still until she heard his shoes fade down the hallway. Aaron came to the kitchen doorway, thin shoulders hunched inside his t-shirt. He did the sympathy face, he asked. The procedure face. Aaron tried to grin, failed, and rubbed his eyes. I can pick up more shifts at the campus lab. You're already at 20 hours and full course load. We need money. We need your A1C stable and your grades intact. The words came sharper than she meant. She exhaled, softened her tone. I'll handle it. He looked at her for a long beat, then nodded because he knew when arguing would drain energy neither of them had. Ivy folded the notice into fourths and slid it under the sugar bowl with the others. The ceramic clink against paper sounded like a timer starting. Her phone buzzed on the counter before she could sit. Unknown number again, Newark Exchange. This time it was a voicemail icon, then a text from an unsaved contact. Confirm Sunday timing. Arrival variance last week noted. No greeting, no signature. She did not need one. She called the number anyway. The house manager answered on the first ring. Miss Singh, I received your message. Good. Your delivery remains at 8:55, not 8:56. I was 40 seconds late in heavy rain? A contingency should account for weather. Ivy bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste metal. Understood. There will be an additional requirement this week. A pre-delivery quality check on Friday at 1600. Bring a sample sponge to the service entrance. You will wait for staff approval. I don't usually do pre-checks. You do now. The line clicked dead. Ivy stared at her reflection in the dark phone screen, at the fine lines of fatigue that had settled around her mouth this year, then set the phone down face up so she would stop seeing herself in it. By Wednesday afternoon, the kitchen she rented by the hour smelled of caramelized sugar and sanitizer. And the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke against the loading dock door in hard sheets. Ivy boxed a plain sponge sample while thunder rolled across the river and packed it in a smaller white carton with the bakery seal centered and level. She took a bus north, then walked the last block under an umbrella whose spokes bent in the wind. Moretti's townhouse looked untouched by the weather, stone steps slick but gleaming, security glass lit from within. The service entrance sat off the side alley, framed by black iron fencing and a camera dome that tracked her approach with quiet precision. She pressed the intercom. Name, a male voice said. Ivy Singh, Friday quality check. A lock buzzed. Inside, the corridor was narrow, warm, and immaculate, with polished concrete floors and recessed lights that made every scuff on her boots visible. A junior staffer in a tailored vest took her box without meeting her eyes and motioned toward a bench by the wall. Wait here. She sat. Across from her, two housekeepers in matching uniforms reviewed inventory on a tablet, speaking softly in Italian. At the far end, a pantry door opened and closed in measured intervals as trays moved through. Nobody was rude. Nobody was kind. She existed in the room the way a mop bucket existed. Necessary, temporary, not part of the conversation. After 11 minutes, the house manager arrived, tablet in hand, expression untouched by weather or hurry. Ms. Singh. Ivy rose. Is there a problem with the standard order? We're refining protocol. The manager opened the sample box, pressed 2 fingers lightly into the sponge edge, checked texture, then scraped a crumb onto a plate and tasted without changing expression. Acceptable. Ivy waited. The manager set the plate down. Your packaging needs adjustment. It's the same packaging you approved for months. Margins evolve. Ivy felt heat rise up her neck. What adjustment? Use reinforced baseboards, 1/4 inch thicker, white ribbon only, no printed logo visible on top panel. Position label on right side, not center. She glanced at Ivy's coat, still damp at the hem. And present in neutral outerwear. No branded apron strings visible at pickup. Ivy looked down. A thread from her bakery apron had worked loose at her cuff. She tucked it in with 2 fingers. You're asking me to remove my logo from my own box. I'm asking for compliance with house preference. Her throat tightened, then released. Will this affect payment? No, provided instructions are followed. It was always about control, never about cake. About proving she could be moved, corrected, resized to fit someone else's surface. Ivy nodded once, because she had already spent bus fare she had not budgeted and would spend more replacing boards she did not need. I'll update the packaging. Good. The manager took 1 step back, signaling dismissal. Sunday at 8:55. 1 ring. Ivy shouldered her bag and turned toward the exit. As she reached the corridor corner, voices carried from the main stairwell beyond the service hall, low and clipped. She caught only fragments. Dock permits froze. No names on paper. Mr. Moretti said tonight. She did not look over. Staff had warned her with silence more effectively than words. Eyes down, forward motion, leave. She kept walking until the outer door shut behind her, and rain hit her face in cold needles. The weather turned mean over the weekend, wind pushing dirty water into the gutters and rattling loose metal signs after midnight. Sunday began in darkness again. 5:12 on her stove clock. And Ivy worked with a heating pad strapped to her lower back under her sweater while butter softened on the counter. Aaron slept through her leaving this time. Glucometer tucked under his pillow the way anxious children hid toys. And she stood at his doorway for 2 breaths before forcing herself to go. At 8:47, she turned onto Moretti Street with the finished cake balanced against her chest. Reinforced board under the box. Plain white ribbon tied exactly as instructed. The convoy was already in position. 2 SUVs, 1 sedan, 1 unmarked van she had not seen before. A valet in black gloves stood near the curb by the gate scanner, shoulders rigid despite the rain. When he stepped toward her to check the delivery label, his left hand trembled so hard the scanner clicked twice against the plastic sleeve. You all right? Ivy asked quietly. He jerked as if the question itself was risky. Fine, ma'am. His smile appeared half a second late. He scanned again, opened the gate, and looked past her shoulder instead of at her. Proceed. The path lights reflected in puddles like fractured glass. Ivy climbed the steps and pressed the bell once. No immediate chime sounded from inside, only the muffled thud of hurried movement somewhere beyond the thick door. She waited with rain dripping from her hood to the marble at her feet. 10 seconds. 15. 20. From inside, a man's voice, low and tight. Then another voice she recognized as the house manager's, sharper than usual. She could not make out words, only cadence. Command refusal, command again. A heavy object scraped across a floor. Then silence dropped, dense and abrupt. The door opened at last. Not by the house manager, but by a different staff member Ivy had never seen. A young woman in a pressed uniform with damp hair at her temples and eyes too wide for someone in a climate-controlled foyer. Delivery, Ivy said. Yes, sorry. Bring it in. The woman stepped aside and immediately glanced over her shoulder toward the hallway, as if checking who had heard her speak. The foyer looked the same and not the same. Crystal lights, polished wood, rugs swallowing footsteps. but 2 additional security men stood at the corridor intersection near the dining room. Earpieces in, jackets unbuttoned over holsters, bodies angled outward. One held a phone at chest level, screen lit with a floor plan. Ivy set the box on the pantry counter marker, a lined label right side, ribbon plain and centered. The new staffer reached for the envelope drawer with fingers that fumbled the key twice before opening it. "First week?" Ivy asked, keeping her voice low. The woman gave a tiny nod. "I'm covering." "For who?" No answer. The woman slid the envelope across and withdrew her hand quickly, as if the contact point on the marble had burned. Behind them, footsteps hit the corridor hard. Not running, controlled, but fast. The house manager appeared, hair perfectly set, tablet tucked under one arm, expression carved into neutrality that did not quite hide the strain at her mouth. "Ms. Singh," she said, "you may go." Ivy picked up her empty carrier. "Is there an issue with—" "You may go now." The manager's voice stayed formal, but each word landed with steel underneath. "Next Sunday, same window." Ivy nodded and moved toward the foyer. As she passed the open archway to the front hall, she saw a man standing just inside the study threshold. Broad shoulders in a charcoal suit, one hand braced against the doorframe, speaking to someone deeper in the room she couldn't see. Luca Moretti did not raise his voice, yet the edge in it carried across polished stone. "Lock the south entrance. No one in or out until I clear it. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir." 2 men answered at once. Ivy kept walking, pulse beating high in her throat. The front door opened before she reached for it, one security guard already in place outside despite the rain, scanning the street with narrowed eyes. At the curb, the trembling valet was gone. In his place stood a different man, older, jaw set, hands steady on the scanner. She stepped through the gate and onto the sidewalk. The rain had intensified, wind driving it sideways. Halfway down the block, near a shuttered florist with a broken awning, a dark sedan idled with lights off, barely visible through the weather. As she passed, the driver's side window lowered just 2 inches. A man's voice drifted out, smooth and soft enough that she had to slow to catch it. "Ivy." She stopped because hearing her name in that tone pulled old alarm through her body before thought could catch up. The face inside turned toward her, familiar in the way a scar was familiar. Dev Malik, clean-shaven, expensive watch, smile careful and bright, while one muscle jumped at the corner of his jaw. "Been a long time," he said, still smiling, eyes fixed on her like he already knew her route home. Rain slid off the sedan's roof in silver lines, and Dev Malik leaned toward the 2-inch crack in the window as if he were greeting an old friend outside a restaurant instead of waiting in the dark beside a shuttered florist. Up close, he looked polished in a way that used to fool people. Pressed collar, clean jaw, a watch face catching streetlight. Only the small jump in the muscle near his mouth gave him away. Ivy kept both hands on the cake carrier handle to stop them from shaking. "You vanished," he said, smiling. Not polite. Her heartbeat climbed into her throat. "Move your car." "That's your first sentence?" His smile widened, thin and controlled. "After everything I covered for you?" "You didn't cover anything. You took." A scooter hissed past on wet pavement. 2 people under one umbrella crossed at the corner without looking at them. Dev watched Ivy with bright, fixed attention, then tapped ash from a cigarette out through the window gap, even though he wasn't smoking. Habit. Performance. His voice dropped lower. "Get in. We'll talk where it's private." "I'm not getting in your car." His jaw flexed once. "You're delivering cakes to men with armored convoys now. I expected better judgment from you than trying to climb social ladders with frosting." Ivy swallowed the burn of humiliation and took one step back from the door. You followed me here. I protect my investments. I'm not one. He laughed softly, like she had told a childish lie. The rear door opened from inside the sedan, and a man she didn't recognize shifted in the back seat, bulky coat, thick neck, eyes flat. Dev angled his head toward him without breaking eye contact with Ivy. See? This is why paperwork matters. People think feelings cancel signatures. He held up a clear plastic folder. Through rain-beaded glare, she saw copies of loan pages with her name typed wrong, then corrected by hand, then signed in a slant that mimicked her old signature from years ago. Her stomach dropped anyway. At the bottom of one page was Arun's full legal name, printed in block letters. Dev let her see it for one beat longer, and then set it on the passenger seat. Outstanding balance increased this week. Interest, penalties, inconvenience. You forged those. You can say that in court if you can afford one. He lowered his voice further. Or you can start cooperating again, and your brother keeps his school schedule. At her brother, all the noise on the block seemed to muffle. Don't say his name. You're in no position to set terms. Dev reached out through the narrow window gap and caught her wrist before she could pull away. His grip was hidden by the door frame, fingers crushing into the inside of her arm where fabric was thinnest. Listen carefully. Pretty girls disappear over unpaid balances. Boys with expensive prescriptions stop getting lucky. Pain shot up to her elbow. Ivy stared at his hand, then forced herself to lift her gaze to his face. Let go. You made me look careless. His smile stayed in place while his eyes hardened. That has a price. From behind her, the iron gate at Moretti's property clicked open and shut. Footsteps on stone. She didn't turn. Dev felt the shift in her attention and released her wrist with deliberate slowness, as if granting a favor. He brushed invisible lint from his cuff. Tonight, keep your phone on, he said. You'll get instructions. Don't make me repeat myself. He raised the window, and the sedan pulled away without headlights until it reached the intersection. Ivy stood in the rain until cold soaked through the knees of her pants. When she finally looked down, 4 red finger marks were blooming where he had held her. At the corner of her vision, one of Moretti's security men paused by the gate, watching the street with professional neutrality. He didn't approach. She didn't ask. She walked to the bus stop 2 blocks over because her legs needed movement more than shelter. On the ride back, she counted inhalations against the fogged window and opened her phone only once, long enough to type a message to Arun. Running late. Eat first. Take the evening dose on time. She deleted 3 different versions of a second sentence and sent nothing else. By early evening, the rain had thinned to a dirty mist, and the bakery's front windows reflected the neon open sign in broken pink across the wet sidewalk. Ivy tied her apron knot with stiff fingers and covered the bruise on her wrist with a long cuff before unlocking the door for the dinner rush. The shop always looked smaller at night, every surface carrying a history of repairs, patched tile near the sink, a refrigerator handle held by 2 mismatched screws, paint bubbles above the oven vent where steam had won over primer. The display case lights hummed, making the glazed tarts shine like jewelry she could never afford. Customers came in waves. A nurse still in scrubs bought 2 rolls and paid in exact change. A couple argued in whispers over a birthday order at pickup. A teenager asked for day-olds and grinned when Ivy added 1 extra. She moved through transactions by muscle memory, smile on, shoulders square, eyes tracking door, register, oven timer, door again. At 8:36 p.m., while she boxed a carrot loaf for a regular, she noticed the reflection of a dark sedan idling across the street in the glass behind him. It stayed there for 10 minutes. Then it moved on. At 8:49, Her friend Mina texted from the hospital cafeteria. "You okay? You sound off?" Ivy typed, "Busy. Later." She almost added, "Please call me in 10 minutes, and stopped. She had learned that dragging people into fear did not always create safety. The bell above the bakery door chimed at 9:02. Wind pushed in first, carrying wet metal and diesel. Dev walked in without an umbrella, water stippling his shoulders, smile in place. Two men entered behind him and split left and right with practiced spacing, one pretending to look at the pastry labels, the other lingering by the entrance with his hands in his coat pockets. Ivy set down the cake knife she was holding. "We're closing soon." Dev glanced at the wall clock as if amused by her insistence on normal rules. "Then this is efficient timing." A woman near the window stiffened, purse clutched to her chest. A college kid at the corner table lifted his phone halfway, camera app already open, unsure whether to keep recording or leave. No one moved toward the door. No one moved toward Ivy. Dev strolled to the display case and tapped the glass. "Cute business. Fragile." He looked up at her. "Come outside." "No." His smile thinned. "That wasn't a request." "It's my store. You don't come in here and—" The case exploded under the swing of his forearm. Glass cracked in a jagged burst, trays tilting, frosting smearing down the inside panel. Someone screamed. The teenager by the door bolted into the rain. Dev grabbed Ivy's elbow and yanked her around the counter, hard enough to slam her hip into the register. "Lock the door," he said to the man by the entrance. The man turned the latch. The bell gave one small, useless chime. Ivy twisted, trying to drop her weight the way a self-defense instructor had taught at a free community class years ago. Dev anticipated it, wrenching her arm higher behind her back until her shoulder lit with pain. "Don't perform for me," he murmured near her ear, voice warm for the room, venom for her alone. "Your little mafia trick cost me a shipment. You'll repay that tonight." She kicked backward and caught his shin. He cursed under his breath, tightened his hold, and dragged her toward the side door that opened to the alley where delivery crates were stacked. Her sneakers slipped on powdered sugar and glass grit. The customers pressed to the walls, faces pale, phones up, breath fogging the windows. "Please," the woman with the purse whispered to no one in particular. Ivy's throat closed so hard, sound scraped when she tried to shout. "Call." Dev jerked her forward, cutting off the word. Cold air knifed in as his man shoved open the alley door. Rain hammered the metal dumpster lids outside. Ivy caught one frantic glimpse of headlights turning onto the block, dark vehicles moving fast and tight. Then Dev hauled her over the threshold, and the world narrowed to wet concrete, his hand on her arm, and the smell of gasoline. "Move," he snapped. Her body stalled for one fatal beat, every survival instinct colliding at once. Fight, run, freeze. She heard Arun's laugh in her memory from that morning, heard Mina's text tone still unanswered, heard glass settling behind her in tiny crystalline taps. Dev pulled her toward a waiting car at the alley mouth. Rear door open, engine revving. Tires screamed at the corner. Black SUVs cut across the alley entrance in a hard diagonal, boxing the sedan before it could launch. Doors opened in synchronized bursts. Men in dark coats spilled out with disciplined speed, not shouting, not hesitating, hands signaling angles and exits. Red and blue tactical lights strobed off wet brick from an unmarked vehicle sliding in behind them. Dev stopped moving. His grip stayed locked on Ivy's elbow, but his bravado cracked at the edges. Luca Moretti stepped from the center SUV in a charcoal suit, gone darker at the shoulders from rain, coat unbuttoned, posture controlled enough to make everyone else look frantic. He took in the alley in one sweep. Ivy in Dev's grip. 2 associates by the bakery door, locked sedan, civilian sightlines, possible exits. When he spoke, his voice was low and barely contained, and every person under his command moved on the first syllable. Seal the block. Medic inside. Cameras. Yes, sir. Came back from 3 directions. One team pivoted toward the storefront, pushing through the front entrance to secure customers and injuries. Another cut power to the sedan and pulled keys from the ignition through the open window. A third took alley positions, umbrellas snapping open over equipment, while rain turned the concrete slick. Dev yanked Ivy closer, angling her between himself and Luca. Stay back. Luca didn't raise his voice. Release her. You think this ends because you showed up with suits? Dev's words came faster, breath visible in the cold. She owes me. She is not collateral. Luca's gaze stayed on Dev's hands, then shifted once to Ivy's face. Ms. Singh, look at me. It took effort, but she did. His expression did not soften. It steadied. Drop your weight to the left when I say now, he said. Can you do that? Her pulse hammered so hard she tasted salt, but she nodded once. Dev barked a laugh that sounded frayed. You're giving instructions in my negotiation? Luca took 1 step forward, enough to draw Dev's focus, not enough to trigger a panic jerk. Rain ran down Luca's temple and along his jaw, ignored. This is not a negotiation. A uniformed officer appeared at the alley mouth with 2 more behind him, weapons low but ready, taking cues from both police protocol and Moretti's security perimeter with uneasy speed. Someone in the bakery started crying. Somewhere, a phone kept ringing and ringing from inside a dropped handbag. Dev's grip shifted as he turned his head toward the new movement. That half-inch adjustment was all Luca had been waiting for. Now, Luca said. Ivy dropped hard to her left, knees slamming wet concrete. Dev lunged to recapture her, balance broken. 2 security men hit him high and low in one controlled collision, driving him into the side panel of his own sedan. His forearms scraped metal with a hollow clang. The man by the bakery door bolted and made 3 strides before an officer tackled him into stacked crates. Hands where I can see them, a voice shouted. I said I'm unarmed, Dev yelled back, twisting under the hold as cuffs clicked around one wrist, then the other. Luca crossed the distance to Ivy in 4 strides and crouched just far enough to check her posture without touching her first. Any head strike? No. Can you stand? Yes. He offered his hand only after she nodded again. His grip was firm and brief, all function. Once she was upright, he turned to the nearest medic. Elbow and shoulder assessment. Document bruising now. The medic guided Ivy toward the bakery's back entrance, speaking softly, penlight already in hand. Behind them, Luca remained in the rain, while officers read Dev his rights over the drum of water on metal. Dev kept talking, threats dressed as legal language, promises about debt enforcement, and witnesses who would disappear. No one answered him. Inside, the bakery looked torn open. Glass glittered under fluorescent light. A tray of eclairs lay upside down on the floor beside a fallen stool. Customers sat where medics had placed them, wrapped in foil blankets, statements being taken one by one. The college kid still had his phone up, recording shakily until an officer asked for the footage and he surrendered it with both hands. At 9:27 p.m., while a medic pressed gauze to a shallow cut on Ivy's palm she hadn't noticed getting, Luca stepped in from the alley, rainwater darkening the shoulders of his suit, and spoke to his security chief without lowering his gaze from Ivy. Guest wing prepared. Clinic transfer for her brother under alias protocol. Bakery closed under renovation notice tonight. His jaw tightened once. No one touches this site until forensic sweep is complete. The chief nodded. Understood. Luca finally looked directly at Ivy. You are coming with us now. It wasn't a question. For the first time since Dev had grabbed her, that certainty felt less like another cage and more like a door locking behind her instead of a head. She nodded, and when the rear door of the SUV closed and the city lights blurred into rain across armored glass, the tremor she had been holding in her spine broke loose all at once. The tremor started in Ivy's hands, climbed her forearms, and took over her shoulders until even her teeth clicked once against each other. She pressed her palms flat on her knees and stared at the stitched seam of the SUV seat across from her, counting breaths because counting was the only thing that still obeyed her. Rain drummed on armored glass. Sirens flared somewhere behind them, then faded. Luca sat opposite, one hand braced on the center console as the vehicle cut through wet turns. Water darkened the shoulders of his charcoal suit, but his voice stayed even as he spoke into a secure phone. Update. A man answered through speaker static. Primary target in custody. Second male in custody. One fled on foot, picked up 2 blocks east by patrol. Chain of custody on devices? Collected. Bagged at scene. Get copies of every civilian recording before it hits social media. Offer receipts, not threats. Luca glanced once at Ivy's bruised wrist. And pull bakery exterior camera loops from 6 p.m. onward. Redundant backups. Understood. He ended that call and made another before the line even settled. Clinic transfer status. A woman's clipped voice came through. Her brother is en route now with 2 of our people and 1 medical escort. Alias profile active. Intake flagged as priority. Any resistance? From him, yes. Verbal only. He wanted his sister. Put him on with her the moment they clear triage. Luca disconnected, looked at Ivy directly, and kept his tone functional. Your brother is moving to a private floor at St. Bridget Annex. He will be registered under an alias tonight. His medication remains uninterrupted. The pressure in her chest shifted, not gone, but less jagged. He'll panic if I disappear. He won't disappear. Luca's jaw set. He'll be guarded. The SUV slowed into a descending ramp beneath the townhouse. Concrete walls rose around them, dry and bright under recessed strip lights. 2 security vehicles already waiting in marked bays with engines running. The door opened before the car fully stopped. Warm, filtered air replaced rain and diesel. A medic in navy scrubs stepped in first. Miss Singh, I need your shoulder and wrist now. Ivy started to protest that she was fine, then tried to lift her left arm and felt the joint pull with a sharp warning. The medic's expression didn't change. Thank you. Out of the vehicle. Everything moved in controlled lanes. One guard took her empty carrier and tagged it. Another photographed the bruises at her wrist with a timestamp board. The medic palpated her shoulder while walking. Not rough, not gentle, efficient. They entered through a private service elevator, rose 2 floors, and stepped into a corridor lined with muted wallpaper and thick carpet that erased footfall. Class contrast hit her with almost physical force. Polished walnut trim, museum lighting, climate control that smelled faintly of cedar. While she stood there in sugar-streaked black pants with glass grit still caught in the soles of her sneakers. The house manager met them at the guest wing threshold, tablet in hand, composure restored to exact lines. Suite 3 is secured, house staff restricted to approved list only. Good, Luca said. No one enters without my clearance. Medic exclusion only. Yes, sir. He turned to Ivy. You stay here tonight. The door remains locked from outside and inside. That is security, not confinement. If you want out, you tell me directly. She nodded once, then again, when he waited for verbal confirmation. I understand. Inside Suite 3, the air was warm enough to sting her cold skin. A cream sofa faced a gas fireplace already lit. Fresh clothes sat folded on a bench. Plain black leggings, a soft gray sweater, socks still banded in paper. On a side table, someone had placed a glass of water, electrolyte packets, and a plate with toast triangles she could not imagine eating. The medic guided her to an armchair and began a full assessment. Pupil check. Follow my light. Good. Grip both hands. Stronger right. Any nausea? No. Any dizziness? Only when I stand too fast. Expected after adrenaline dump. He cleaned the shallow cut on her palm, applied butterfly strips, then wrapped her wrist in a flexible brace. Shoulder is strained, not dislocated. Ice 20 on, 20 off, no lifting overhead. While he worked, the house manager stood by the door and relayed updates from her tablet. Police request preliminary statement tonight. Formal interview tomorrow. Forensics entered the bakery at 2142. Structural glass replacement can begin after evidence release. Renovation cover notice drafted for your approval, Mr. Moretti. Send it, Lucas said. No mention of criminal event. Equipment failure only. Ivy looked up. If you say equipment failure, Dev's people may think they can return before the scene's public. Lucas shifted his gaze to her, expectant. She swallowed and pushed through the fatigue fog. Say the gas line failed inspection and the city sealed the block for repairs. That keeps everyone out and gives you legal perimeter without showing fear. Her voice steadied as the logic lined up. And there's a cloud backup tied to my register tablet. If someone gets my shop laptop, they can wipe local copies. I need to change that password now. For the first time since the alley, the house manager's eyes sharpened with something like professional respect. Luca held out his hand for Ivy's phone. Do it. She entered the old passcode with stiff fingers, changed credentials, enabled two-factor authentication, and gave the new emergency token to the security chief when he arrived at the door. Pull all footage from interior, exterior, and alley cam. Start at 7 and run through close. There's a blind spot by the flower rack. Use customer phones to bridge it. Already in process, the chief said. This helps. By the time the wall clock in the suite read 10:14 p.m., her wet clothes had been replaced, the bruise photos were logged, and a printed property sheet listed everything recovered from her at scene. Phone, wallet, keys, apron, one broken hair clip, one receipt from the pharmacy. Even her chaos had become inventory. A secure phone on the table vibrated. The house manager answered, listened, then held it toward Ivy. Your brother. She grabbed it too fast and winced at her shoulder. Aaron? His voice came thin with fear and stubbornness. They said not to use my name. They put me in a room bigger than our apartment. Is this real? It's real. Her throat tightened, then cleared. Did they check your glucose? Twice. They gave me food that tastes like cardboard. That means it's hospital food. A shaky laugh broke on his end. Did he send these people? Yes. Silence, then quieter. Are you safe? She looked at Luca standing across the room. Rain-damp suit replaced by a dark jacket, still watchful, still upright, like he had not sat down once all night. I am now. Don't leave without telling me. I won't. When the call ended, a plainclothes detective arrived with a recorder and a legal pad. Luca stayed by the window while Ivy gave a concise statement. Timeline, words spoken, the forged documents in Dev's car, customer witnesses, damage sequence, alley extraction. She did not embellish and did not minimize. The detective asked whether she had prior relationship with the suspect. Ex-husband, she said. Any existing restraining order? No, couldn't afford filing and service. He nodded like he heard that answer every week. You willing to sign complaint add-ons for coercion and document fraud? Yes. After he left, security brought in 2 clear evidence sleeves. One held copies of the forged debt pages recovered from Deb's vehicle. The other held still images printed from the bakery footage with timestamps. Luca set both on the table in front of Ivy. These are now logged through police and our counsel. Nothing disappears. She stared at her own name typed wrong, corrected by hand, used like a trapdoor under her life. He put Arun on those pages. He won't reach him again. Luca's voice stayed low, controlled in a way that carried more force than shouting. No calls, no messages, no intermediaries. If contact is attempted, we answer it through law. The adrenaline crash hit fully then, heavy and disorienting. Her hands started shaking again, slower this time, but deeper. The medic reappeared with a blanket and set it around her shoulders without comment. Luca watched the tremor travel through her fingers, then spoke to the house manager. Tea, no caffeine, and lock this floor to inner ring only. The manager inclined her head. Done. When the suite quieted and the corridor door sealed behind the last staff member, Ivy sat with the blanket pulled tight and listened to the soft hiss of the fireplace. Luca remained near the table, looking at the evidence sleeves as if they were pieces on a board he had seen before in another arrangement. She heard herself ask the question before she decided to. Why did you believe me? His gaze shifted to her, unreadable for a long beat. Because you gave me details that liars avoid. Amounts, dates, pharmacy account language. You asked for your brother first, not yourself. That's not enough for men like you. Men like me? A faint, humorless exhale. No, it usually isn't. He moved to the armchair opposite her and sat for the first time that night, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Up close, she saw a thin, pale scar crossing his right knuckle, another near his wrist where the skin had healed slightly raised. Old injuries, cleanly closed. You hid a note in a cake board, he said. Do you know why that worked? Ivy shook her head. Because 10 years ago, my sister hid a note in a place she thought I would see. He spoke without theatrics, each word measured. She was 22, married to a man everyone described as respectable, charitable, polite at dinners. The room seemed to contract around the sound of the fire. She asked for help twice in direct language, he continued. No one acted because they called it a private domestic conflict. The third time, she stopped asking directly and started leaving signs. Missed appointments. A bruise explained away. A message routed through staff that never reached me because someone decided to filter family matters from business matters. Ivy's grip tightened on the blanket. What happened? His jaw flexed once. By the time I understood, she was gone. He held her gaze, no softness in the statement, only fact worn down to edge. Not because there were no warnings, because the warnings were treated as inconvenience. The fireplace clicked as the gas shifted. Outside the tall window, rain had thinned to a mist over black glass. I built protocols after that, Luca said. Every delivery logged, every variance flagged. Every staff member trained that fear is data, not drama. He glanced at her bandaged hand. When your timing changed and your packaging shifted, my manager reported irritation. Then she reported your eye contact deteriorating week over week. Weight loss. Repeated unknown callers at the gate perimeter. Then I cut your cake tonight and found cardboard scoring where it should have been solid. Ivy closed her eyes briefly. You found it. I found it. His voice lowered. And I did not ignore it. A long silence followed. Not empty, just full of things neither of them had the energy to name. Her body still hurt. Her shop was shattered. Her brother was in a guarded room under a false name. Yet the axis had moved. From private endurance to recorded facts, from whispered threats to documented charges. She opened her eyes and met his again. Dev said my mafia trick cost him a shipment. It did, Luca said, because your note gave me probable cause to examine the shell companies attached to your forged debt. We froze one transport route this afternoon through port compliance. He panicked and came for you in public. His expression hardened at the memory. Predators make mistakes when they lose control of timing. Ivy let out a breath that shook at the end. So this isn't charity? No. He stood, smoothing a crease from his sleeve. It is protection with terms. You tell the truth. You follow security protocol. You do not meet him, message him, or negotiate through anyone claiming to speak for him. Do you understand me? She nodded. Yes. Say it. I understand. He moved to the door, then paused with his hand on the latch. One more term. Sleep if you can. At 7 o'clock, we review your legal options with counsel, and at 7:30 you see your brother. I'll have breakfast sent up before 6:30. The command cadence should have felt cold. Instead, it gave shape to a night that had nearly broken into pieces. Ivy leaned back against the chair, blanket tight around her shoulders, and listened to the lock engage after he left. Solid and deliberate. While the first stretch of silence she trusted in years settled over the room. The lock clicked, and Ivy stayed in the armchair with the blanket pulled to her chin, listening for the sound to mean danger instead of safety. It didn't. The suite remained still except for the low hiss of the fireplace and the muted hum of ventilation inside the walls. She tried to unclench her hands and felt every place her body had absorbed the night. The pull in her left shoulder, the sharp sting in her palm when she flexed too far, the deep ache at her hip where she had hit the register. On the side table, the tea arrived, steaming in porcelain too thin and expensive for her to imagine replacing if she dropped it. She stood anyway, crossed to the window, and parted the heavy drape with 2 fingers. The city beyond the glass looked far away. Wet streets reflecting amber lights, traffic reduced to occasional streaks. From this height and silence, Newark looked orderly, almost gentle. Her bakery floor was still covered in broken glass. The secure phone vibrated again. She flinched before she looked, then saw the house manager's extension. Yes? Your friend Mina has called twice through the police line. Do you want to accept? Ivy closed her eyes briefly. Yes, please. Mina came on breathless and angry, in the way only frightened people were. Where are you? Safe. That's not an address. It can't be right now. Ivy leaned her forehead lightly against the cool window. Are you okay? I'm fine. You're not. They took my statement because I came by after shift and saw the tape. There are videos everywhere, Ivy. Your front window, him grabbing you, all of it. The room tilted for a second. Did anyone get hurt badly? Cuts, mostly. That nursing student who's always there got stitches in his hand. He kept saying he should have done more. Mina's voice softened. Listen to me. Don't go back alone. Not once. Promise me. I promise. Good. I left your spare keys with Officer Delgado like they asked. And your landlord's been hovering in the hallway, asking questions. Ivy gave a humorless breath that almost passed for a laugh. Of course he has. Let him hover. You stay alive. Mina paused, then lowered her voice. People with money offering protection can be another trap. You know that, right? Ivy looked toward the closed suite door. I know. When the call ended, she stood very still with the phone in her hand until the screen went black. Mina had voiced the exact thing coiled under her ribs since the SUV door shut. A man could sound calm, organize logistics, and still build a cage with better furniture. A soft knock came, one measured tap. "Miss Singh," Lucas said from the other side. "May I enter?" She should have said no just to prove she could. Instead, she heard herself answer, "Yes." He came in alone, jacket off now, white shirt open at the throat, sleeves rolled once. Without the rain and public command cadence, he looked less distant and more dangerous in a different way. Controlled power stripped of ceremony. His eyes took in the untouched tea, the open drapes, the way she held her left arm guarded against her body. "Pain level," he said. "Manageable. That is not a number. 6 if I stay still, 8 if I forget and reach." He gave one short nod and set a small packet on the table. "Anti-inflammatory, medically cleared for your glucose profile. Take it with food." Ivy didn't move toward it. "Do you give everyone this level of detail, or just the people who leave notes in your desserts?" "People under my roof." There it was again, that language of perimeter and claim. She turned from the window to face him fully. "I need to ask this clearly once, and I need a clear answer. What do you want from me besides testimony?" He didn't look surprised. "Truth? Compliance with security? No independent contact with Dev or his associates?" "That's operational. I asked what you want." A long beat passed. The fire clicked behind them. "You are asking whether this protection becomes debt?" "Yes." "It does not." Her throat tightened anyway. "I signed papers once because someone said they were temporary and procedural. I spent 2 years learning how expensive that word can get." Luca's expression shifted, not softer, but less armored. "Then hear this as precisely as possible. You owe me nothing personal. There is no private repayment, no social obligation, no hidden contract." His voice lowered. "If you decide tomorrow you want state custody only and no contact with me, I will transfer every file and step back." The answer should have relieved her. Instead, it made fear and a different heat collide in the same breath. Because she believed him and didn't know what to do with believing him. She noticed the scar across his knuckles again, the steadiness in his posture even when he wasn't performing authority, the way he gave her space and still made the room feel contained. "I don't know how to trust this," she said. "You don't need to trust all of it tonight." He glanced toward the packet on the table. "Trust one instruction at a time." The secure phone rang before she could reply, sharp and urgent. Luca checked the display, jaw tightening. "Detective Rourke." He answered on speaker. Rourke's voice came clipped, background noise loud behind him. "We have a custody issue. Malik has been processed and is waiting transport. He's requesting a direct call with Ms. Singh. Claims he has financial records tied to ongoing threats and will release them only to her." Luca's tone turned to steel. Denied. Normally, yes. But he just referenced her brother's alias and room wing correctly. We need to determine if he has a leak inside hospital intake or if he's bluffing from old intel. Cold swept through Ivy so fast, her fingers went numb. "Put him through," she said. Luca turned to her at once. "No. If he has that alias, we need to know how. You just said fear is data. So is this." Rourke stayed silent on the line, listening. Ivy stepped closer, shoulder protesting, and kept her gaze on Luca. Recorded call, on speaker, with witnesses. No private negotiation. Let him talk himself into remand. For a moment, she thought he would refuse on sheer protective instinct. Then he gave one tight nod. Controlled conditions only. Rourke exhaled audibly. I can patch in from holding in 3 minutes. I'll have a prosecutor and your counsel on. Do it, Luca said. And log that Ms. Singh requested monitored contact for evidentiary purpose. By 1:30 a.m., the rain had finally stopped, leaving the windows filmed with moisture and the city lights sharper against the dark. They moved to a smaller sitting room off the guest corridor, where a fixed recording unit sat on a credenza. The house manager stood by the door with her tablet, security chief beside her, both serving as witnesses. Luca remained near Ivy's right shoulder, not touching her, presence as deliberate as a wall. Rourke's voice came first through the speaker. Recording active. Present online. Detective Rourke, Assistant Prosecutor Elena Shaw, Counsel for Ms. Singh, Mr. Moretti as Protective Custodian, and Ms. Singh. Detainee Dev Malik will be connected now. A click. Then Dev's voice, smooth and amused. Ivy. There you are. Her pulse hammered, but her voice held. This call is recorded. Good. Then everyone can hear I'm trying to resolve a private marital debt. There is no marital debt. You signed. Forgery is not signature, she cut in. Threatening my brother is not collection. Dragging me out of my business is not negotiation. A short silence, then the familiar smile in his tone. You sound brave with an audience. I sound done. His breath roughened for the first time. You think he can keep you? Men like him protect what they own until they get bored. Luca's hand closed once at his side, knuckles whitening, but he stayed silent. Dev pressed on. Walk away now, Ivy. Bring the ledger copy and I can still make this easy. Her mind caught the word instantly. Ledger copy. Not bluff, then. He believed she had one. She chose each syllable with care. You mean the ledger page showing shell transfers from Harbor Meridian to your collection accounts? The one tied to cash pickups labeled as vendor penalties? Dev went quiet. Assistant Prosecutor Shaw spoke over the line, calm and lethal. Mr. Malik, thank you. That statement constitutes acknowledgement of account control relevant to pending extortion charges. You're twisting, Rourke cut in. No one prompted specifics, Dev. You volunteered them. Dev's voice snapped, mask slipping. Ivy, listen to me. If you testify, I will tear your life down, piece by piece. Lease, licenses, guardianship. I know every weak point you have. Fear shot through her, sharp and old, but it no longer arrived alone. She looked straight at the speaker and answered anyway. You knew my weak points because I was isolated. That is over. Do not contact me again. Do not contact my brother. Do not send messages through anyone. Every attempt goes to law enforcement. His laugh came jagged. You don't set terms. Luca stepped forward then, voice low and barely contained, each word precise. She does now. Silence pulsed through the room. Luca continued, still controlled. Hear me clearly, Dev Malik. Ms. Singh is under my protection, permanently. You do not approach her, mention her brother, enter her business perimeter, or route communication through third parties. You breathe in her direction again, and we answer through court, through evidence, and through every statute on witness intimidation available to this city. Dev spat back. Big words from a man hiding behind suits. No, Luca said. From a man standing in front of her while you speak from cuffs. Rourke broke in. That's enough. Transport team is here. Then, to the room at large. For the record, detainee made direct threats against complainant and dependent. We are filing immediate motion to oppose bail and request protective remand." Assistant Prosecutor Shaw added, "Ms. Singh, your statement was clear and useful. Do not engage further if he attempts contact. We'll take it from here." The line disconnected. Ivy didn't realize she was shaking until the house manager offered a glass of water, and she heard the ice tapping against the rim. She took it in both hands, shoulder aching, breath shallow. Luca turned to the security chief. "Hospital protocol goes to red tier. Replace current outer ring by dawn. Anyone who accessed alias intake gets audited." "Yes, sir." "To counsel," he added. "Draft cease contact orders before first light. File with criminal court and family court simultaneously." The room emptied with efficient speed. In less than a minute, it was just Ivy and Luca again, the recording unit's small red light now dark. She set the water down carefully. "When you said permanently, was that for him or for me?" His gaze held hers. "For him. So there is no ambiguity left to exploit. And for me?" A pause. "For you, it means this. Protection remains as long as the threat remains, and choice remains yours the entire time." The answer landed in her like a door opening inward. Not romance, not rescue fantasy, just a boundary spoken out loud with witnesses and law behind it. Her fear didn't vanish. It changed shape. A soft buzz came from the secure phone on the table. Luca checked it and handed it to her. "Clinic update." She answered at once. A night nurse reported Arun's glucose stable, pain-free, asleep after finally agreeing to eat half a turkey sandwich and all his crackers. Ivy thanked her twice before ending the call. When she looked up, Luca was still watching her with that same steady, unreadable focus. "You should rest," he said. She nodded, then surprised herself by adding, "I won't hide forever." "Good," he said. "Hiding is not the plan." He walked her back to Suite 3 and waited while she stepped inside. At the threshold, she turned, blankets still around her shoulders, exhaustion pressing at her bones, but something firmer underneath it now. "I'm still afraid of what this costs," she said. His voice stayed quiet. "Be afraid. Just don't stand alone in it." The lock engaged again after he closed the door, and this time the sound didn't feel like surrender. The lock settled into place, and Ivy stood in the center of the suite with the blanket slipping from one shoulder, listening until her breathing matched the quiet again. She swallowed the anti-inflammatory with 2 bites of dry toast, turned off the fireplace, and lay down without changing the lamp setting, as if full darkness might erase the boundaries she had just fought to rebuild. Sleep came in short, hard drops. At 6:28 a.m., a discreet knock sounded once. "Miss Singh?" the house manager said through the door. "Breakfast and legal packet." Ivy opened it to find a tray, a fresh brace for her wrist, and a sealed folder marked with her name and the date. The manager's posture was precise as always, but there was none of the old corrective edge in her tone. "Mr. Moretti asked that you review before counsel arrives," she said. "Also, an internal matter from Sunday has been resolved. The valet who screened your entry was transmitting your arrival times to Mr. Malik through a prepaid device. He has been handed to police with device logs. The replacement you saw was emergency reassignment." The memory of the trembling scanner clicked into place with a cold, clean certainty. "And the staff member who was covering in the pantry?" "Covering because our regular steward was being interviewed." The manager met her eyes. She was cleared. "The look you saw was fear, not guilt." Ivy nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me directly." "You asked direct questions," the manager replied. "You deserved direct answers." By 7:12, Ivy sat across from Luca and two attorneys in a glass-walled conference room off the guest corridor. Her folder open, pen uncapped, reading every line before anyone spoke. Luca wore a dark suit and a watch that probably cost more than her annual rent had been last year. But he waded through each page turn without pressing her pace. Counsel for Ivy, Ms. Alvarez, tapped the first order. This is the Criminal Protective Order. No contact, direct or indirect. This one is family court mirror filing, so he cannot root through civil debt claims. Ivy looked at Luca. And your contract? He slid a separate document toward her. Clean financing for bakery repairs and expansion. No ownership transfer, no exclusivity clause. Market rate interest, deferred 6 months. She scanned, stopped, and drew a line under one paragraph. Strike personal security discretion language. I choose when your team is inside my shop unless there is active threat. Luca glanced at his counsel, then back at her. Accepted. Add independent audit rights on every disbursement. Accepted. No forced weekly delivery contract. A pause, then a slight shift in his jaw that might have been the beginning of a smile. Accepted. The order was never about control. It was my sister's cake, same vanilla bean, every Sunday for years. I kept buying it after she died because stopping felt like burying her twice. She signed only after Ms. Alvarez nodded. Luca signed next, then passed her a countersigned copy, crisp and binding and entirely above board. No hidden trapdoors, no vague language. Her name spelled correctly on every page. At 7:41, a security convoy took her to St. Bridget Annex through morning traffic and steam lifting from storm drains. Aaron was sitting up in bed when she walked in, hospital socks mismatched, hair flattened on one side, indignation returning now that panic had burned off. They took my shoelaces like I'm an action villain, he said. Ivy laughed for the first time in 2 days and felt how sore her ribs were when she did. She sat on the bed edge and handed him the chocolate-free protein bar from her tray. You scared the escort nurse by asking for 3 different carb counts. She was wrong twice. A nurse entered with discharge paperwork and a glucose log, then lowered her voice. Detective Rourke asked me to tell you bail hearing moved to 10. They'll patch you in from the courthouse witness room. Also, your friend Mina is in the lobby with coffee she claims is medically essential. Mina appeared 3 minutes later, scrubbed jacket over leggings, eyes red-rimmed and fierce. She hugged Ivy carefully around the good shoulder, then pointed at Luca, who remained at the doorway, giving them privacy by distance, not absence. I still don't trust rich men with security details, she said quietly. But I trust paperwork and the way he listens when you say no. Ivy squeezed her hand. That's where I landed too. At 10:03, in a small witness room smelling of copier toner and stale heat, Ivy watched Dev on a monitor in County Orange. The charm peeled down to irritation and contempt. The prosecutor played the recorded call from overnight. His threat about lease, licenses, and guardianship echoed through cheap speakers, stripped of performance by procedure. Rourke submitted the forged ledgers, the shell account trace, civilian footage from the bakery, and the valet's extracted messages. Bail was denied in 3 sentences. Dev leaned toward his attorney and whispered something with a smile that no longer reached anyone. 3 days later, Ivy stood behind temporary plywood at the bakery, while city inspectors signed off the repaired gas line and glass replacement. The false equipment failure notice peeled away in strips. Forensics had released every tagged item. She received them one by one at the back counter. Her phone, wallet, keys, apron in an evidence bag with the seam cut where technicians had removed the hidden ledger page, the broken hair clip, the pharmacy receipt. She tucked the clip into a drawer instead of throwing it out. Proof of a night she survived, not a thing that broke her. Rourke arrived before opening with an envelope. "Final lab authentication on the debt papers," he said. "Ink dating and signature analysis confirm forgery. Also, your cloud backups matched all recovered footage. Blind spot bridged exactly the way you said. What about the customers who filmed?" "Statements complete. The nursing student's stitches are out. He asked if you reopened because he misses your cardamom rolls." She leaned against the counter, exhausted and steadier than she had been in months. "And the man from the alley who ran?" "Pled out yesterday. Cooperative testimony against Malik and the extortion ring." The trial moved quickly because the evidence was blunt. On the second week of November, Ivy took the stand in a navy blazer Mina had ironed at 5 a.m. and read transaction lines from the recovered ledger while the courtroom listened. Shelled transfers, coercive penalties, fake defaults, payments mapped to threats. Dev watched her as if eye contact alone could rebuild control. It didn't. The judge entered convictions on extortion, assault, kidnapping, document fraud, and witness intimidation. Sentencing came the same afternoon due to consolidated charges and prior findings. When deputies let him out in chains, he turned once, searching for her reaction. Ivy did not give him one. By late November, the landlord who had posted procedure notices stood in her bakery doorway with a new politeness and a revised lease he had not offered before. Ivy signed only after Ms. Alvarez marked out predatory penalties and capped annual increases. Rent was current, utilities were current. Aaron's insulin account was prepaid for 3 months, then 6. The expansion funds came in tranches, exactly as contracted. A second oven arrived with a warranty binder thicker than her old business plan. She hired one apprentice and then another. Mina covered weekends until Ivy trained floor staff. The house manager from Moretti's townhouse visited once, in plain clothes, to place a personal order and quietly admit she had never tasted saffron sponge before. The loaded look she had worn in that storm-lit corridor finally made sense now. She had known protocol was failing and had been fighting inside a hierarchy that punished uncertainty. She left that day with a cake box and no corrections for Ivy's posture. On the first Sunday after sentencing, rain held off for the first time in weeks. At 8:55 sharp, Ivy walked up the slate path to Luca's door, carrying a white box tied with plain ribbon, not because she had been ordered, but because she had chosen to keep one ritual and remake its meaning. Security checked her name and stepped aside. No trembling hands, no hidden phones, no silence thick with withheld warnings. The house manager opened the iron door herself and inclined her head. "Good morning, Miss Singh." "Good morning." She set the cake on the marked square in the pantry, then added a small folded note on top. No hollow channel, no flower wrapping, nothing concealed. Luca entered as she straightened, dark suit, controlled movement, eyes landing first on her bandaged wrist, now reduced to a thin support strap, and then on the note. He picked it up, read it once, and looked back at her. "I choose this," he said, repeating her words in a low voice that carried through the quiet room. Yes. Not obligation, not fear, not a debt renamed as devotion. A contract honored, a boundary kept, a decision made in daylight. He set the note down beside the cake and held her gaze. "Stay." The word held no command this time, only an offered place and the weight of everything they had already put in writing and proved in court. Ivy felt the old reflex to step back, to keep moving before stability could be taken away. And then felt Arun's laugh from that morning, Mina's blunt approval, the signed pages in her office safe, the rebuilt glass at her storefront, the evidence no one had been able to erase. She took off her coat, folded it over her arm, and stayed.